Today's episode is brought to you by Positively Productive Systems, whose mission is to be the antidote to your stress and to provide compassionate productivity resources and coaching that help you heal and achieve. Be sure to check out both free and paid resources at positivelyproductive.com/resources.
One of the things that's so interesting about ethics and ethical mentorship is that if your ethics are different, then the goal isn't really to point people out and say, here's how you're being unethical. The goal is to identify what are your own ethics and does this person align with me? And if not, you have the information that you need and you can look to the next person.
You're listening to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Zaratny, founder of Positively Productive Systems and a productivity coach certified in positive psychology and stress management. Join me as we explore ways to live a more proactive, positive life with episodes on productivity, self-awareness, mindset, entrepreneur life, habits and systems, simplicity, fun, and more. I understand overwhelm personally as a multi-passionate entrepreneur, wife and mom to kids and cats, and as a caregiver. I'm here to help you choose what's right for you so you can do less, live more, and breathe easier. Sound good? Let's get to it. Welcome to the Positively Living Podcast. I'm your host, Lisa, and I have a confession for you. Sometimes in a podcast interview, our conversation turns into something neither the guest nor I expected, and today was one of those times. This is what comes from true and open exploration of a topic with the right person. That person today is my guest, Sarah Heeter. Sarah is the founder and CEO of Podfox Media, a podcast production and strategic consultation company, and the co-host of the podcast Big Brave Business. She's a voice for business ethics, camaraderie and connection, and revolutionary leadership in entrepreneurship. She and I began planning for this episode with the idea of talking about ethical coaching, which is something that matters greatly to both of us as coaches and clients, because coaches need coaches. As we began the conversation, we realized that we were actually talking about our definition of ethical and how critical it is to be ethically aligned with coaches, clients, and collaborators. Being ethical is defined as conforming to a standard of what's right and good, and there are definitely certain practices that more readily and obviously fit that. But there are also many gray areas that, although Sarah and I don't agree with them, may not constitute unethical practices either. So we decided to focus on exploring what it means to be ethically aligned with the people in your life and business. We cover a wide range of topics within this conversation, including our own preferences personally and professionally. We talk about distinguishing between business and personal ethics and about making the best choices for coaching and mentoring. Toward the end, Sarah shares a profound story of a coaching experience she had, which really represents the heart of what we're discussing today. It illustrates the best way to choose who you work with, what to watch for, what to catch ahead of time that might be easy to overlook, and essentially why ethical alignment is critical. We've had a number of episodes on the podcast that include the topic of ethics, including ethical marketing, writing, and sales. And if you're interested in exploring this topic more, you can find those episodes by going to the podcast page of the website, positivelyproductive.com/podcast, and typing the word ethical into the search bar. As always, I'd love to know your thoughts on the episode. What's been your experience in hiring a coach? And has ethics played a part of this? Message me and let me know. I always appreciate hearing from you. Now let's join Sarah. Sarah, welcome to the Positively Living Podcast. We've had a chance to collaborate for a while, but I am so excited to be able to welcome you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. You're definitely one of my favorite people to connect with in this crazy online entrepreneurship, online business space. So I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you. I take the compliment. It's an honor. And before we dig into our topic of the day, I'd love it if you'd tell us a bit about who you are, and to me, most importantly, what makes you light up.
I am a CEO and founder of a podcast production and strategic consultation company called Podfox Media. And I'm also the host of the podcast Big Brave Business, which is exactly what it sounds like. We have big and brave conversations about business, really similar to the conversation we're going to have here today and the conversations you and I often have, which is why we're friends. I feel like what lights me up really is feeling connected to myself and to others. Feeling connected to others has really always been a theme in my life, even from the time I was little. And this connection to myself is something that's really been more the past 5 to 8 years that I've really been focused on. And it's really cool. I really love the person I am and the person I'm becoming. So, yeah.
Oh, I love that answer. And I too am a fan of connection. And I think that's probably a big part of why, in a meta kind of way, we have connected.
Yeah.
And having these conversations, this understanding self, that's what I'm all about. And the more that we can do that, it really does open up a world for our taking. Yeah, I talk about big, brave business. I mean, I think that the know thyself principle here is so important in order to go out there and just go after what you want.
And that's part of what makes entrepreneurship so fun, right? Is that it really is as much as you want to put into it. And that's really different from kind of a typical 9 to 5 scenario. You can endlessly pour into a 9 to 5 and see the exact same return. And in entrepreneurship, you really have control over how much do I have available to pour today.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And along those lines, the other choices that we have, where you want to pour into as well, not just how much. And with that, it's a choice in terms of purpose. And that to me feels like a great segue into our topic. This idea, and both of us do value this, right? Is making choices, pouring our energy into receiving energy from others that is ethical.
Yeah.
Let's dig right in by defining this word that we are using. We know that we value it. We know the benefits, but that's what we're talking about today. So tell me, at least in your estimation, what it means to be ethical, how we're defining it in this context and in the context of coaching.
Such a good question and such a big question. And I want to preface my response by saying that people get advanced degrees studying the concept of ethics. This in itself is a really big conversation to have, but the framework that I really use, that I'm basing, my discussions about ethics in business around, have to do with understanding your own core value set and then making decisions based on those core values. And where that gets complicated is, of course, that everybody's core value set might be a little bit different. There are probably some things that are kind of, generally speaking, relatively universal truths, but core values are very personal. So ethics are very personal.
I really like that answer because, again, it goes back to this you get to decide. And immediately I'm thinking of a conversation that I've had with Chantel Endercastle, and we'll be having this episode come out not too long after yours that talks about alignment and aligned action. And I'm immediately thinking of alignment. So when we say ethical, it would probably be like ethical alignment, essentially.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Let's dig in a little further, maybe as an example, what, your values are and what ethical coaching means to you.
I could talk all day just about that. It's something that when building Podfox, I also put a lot of thought into what are my core values, and then also what are the core values of the Podfox brand going to be. And those don't have to be identical, by the way. Now, I think that my values show up a lot in how I do business, of course. They show up in the brand that I've built, to a certain extent, but then they also show up in how I am a leader of my own team and my own organization and how I put together offers and everything like that. So for me personally, some of my core values definitely are like trustworthiness and dependability. A big theme for me as a person individually is a sense of security and safety. I have a really strong core value of humor and fun. And I think that those things all do show up in Podfox core values. And I want to specifically answer this too of Podfox's core values, because we're also looking at, in addition to fun, which is one of our core values, we're also looking at being really results driven and results oriented, which I guess I am personally too. I guess I might as well have included that. I'm an Enneagram 3, and I'm definitely a workaholic by nature and driven by my accomplishments. So I guess that still carries over. There's a lot of inclusivity and equity and accessibility that go into the Podfox core values. What was really important to me to include in the Podfox core values was this element of rebelliousness and this element of pushing boundaries and, just even the icon of the fox. I liked the idea of really being able to serve people who don't feel like their voices are typically heard in their industry or their community, and using this as an opportunity, this organization, these offers, these services, as an opportunity to elevate those voices and empower those voices, because I truly believe that those voices matter. And I like the idea of, if you don't have a seat at the table, that sneaky fox is going to find a way in and is going to build his own platform and use his voice, this little fox guy. So I liked that kind of brand identity. And although I do think that I am doing that by building Podfox, I also know, I just said I tend to be drawn toward security. I tend to be drawn toward, what can I trust? What can I see? What do I know to be true? What feels familiar? What feels comfortable? And some of that is trauma response, probably, but I think that that's an interesting kind of difference where Podfox pushes me to be braver than I probably am in my non-professional life, if that makes sense.
This is such an interesting distinction, and I'm so glad that you brought it up in terms of what we create as businesses potentially and who we are as people and how there can be overlap, and especially when it comes to the solo entrepreneur, the micro entrepreneur. I actually had a conversation, it feels like quite a while back now, as we're, well into the 200s now, with Carly Cunningham, and talking about the distinction between your personal identity and your brand identity. And so along those lines, there has to be a consideration of personal mission, vision, values, and professional. And I can imagine that, at least for me, I would struggle for there not to be significant overlap. But your point is intriguing, to say that there may be something in what you are trying to create outside of you that could challenge you to grow. So I love that. And I love that idea just in general for creating a business that can make you better, bring out the best in you, help you grow in some fashion.
The reality is that, yes, my business affects me, it pushes me, it impacts my life, and I'm obviously very involved and invested in it, but it's not about me. It's about the people I serve. And the core values of the business and the brand are not about me. They're about you. They're about them, anybody engaging with the brand. And I actually think that's really linked to this idea of our whole overarching theme of the conversation here today.
Yeah, I think it's an important distinction. But then I also think that there needs to be, coming back to this idea of alignment, or maybe when it comes to coaching. So in your position of having the separate business that is not about you, but it is about them, when they go to choose you, the same idea with me, when they choose me as a coach, they are now looking for that ethical alignment, essentially, of what you're about. And so that is expressing the values. And again, in my case, I think so far there has been significant overlap. And, maybe it's in terms of the choices of what I create. But I can see differences because off the bat, what definitely overlaps for me is, and it's so many similar ones to you, but integrity is like number one, education, learning, that wonder in the world, but then also fun and humor. And it's interesting too, because that's not only a value of mine, but also a character strength. So
Mm-hmm.
from an authentic standpoint, it just makes sense for me to show up and be a goofball, and then we're going to learn stuff together. Yay.
Yeah.
Now, where I tend to, I guess, branch off a little bit is that I definitely value customization and very specific things that I do one-on-one with clients. However, I also know that there's such a need out there. The value, we're using value in different ways, right? In different contexts. But the bottom line is what someone is getting out of what you have to offer, what it is that they need, and how you're showing up for them. And for me, I know that I've moved toward group programs and things that can offer clients what they need in the moment that maybe isn't necessarily what I would choose. But it's not about me, it's about them. But what's interesting is what is about me is showing up and being accessible and making sure that I can reach people who need to be reached. So I guess there is that alignment after all, even if it's different values.
It's an interesting challenge, is how we're different from how our core values might be different from our business. And I think that they can be different with overlap, but some, it's not exactly the same. As long as they're not in direct opposition of each other, I think it's really, really challenging to show up in an environment where you have direct opposition as a person to the actual business or company or container that you're operating within. And I think we see this show up a lot with business leaders, especially women in business, who are working for someone else. And they are not responsible for building the company culture. They're not responsible for building the offers and the pricing and the environment and the team but they have to operate within it and be part of it. And that can be very difficult and challenging and exhausting to try to show up with your own core values and your own ethics in an environment that has core values and ethics in direct opposition of yours. That's hard.
And again, that goes right back to the idea of alignment. And so when you are searching for support, when you are searching for businesses to work with, for coaches, for people who are going to guide and mentor you, there needs to be that connection, that alignment. So coming back around to this idea that, you're looking for a coach, a mentor, and what this idea is of being ethical, we talked about different values that we have. And I just want to repeat some of the ones that you mentioned, or things that you're searching for in terms of being trustworthy, dependable, that there's a safety. And I think that's incredibly important, regardless of if that's a value of yours. I would like to add or counter, however you would like to see it, that when we are making choices, when we are putting our trust in someone, we do need that safety. I'm thinking about, I just did an episode on our needs and putting our needs first in order to be productive, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and how that physiological and psychological safety that we need, that's really foundational to everything. And so I see that connection in terms of ethics and coaching and how to choose who to work with.
Yeah. It's interesting because for me personally, I can look back at my life and see from the time I was in the womb, and it was a very complicated pregnancy, and my mother was on bed rest with me for almost the entire pregnancy, and without any kind of trigger warnings or tiptoeing into trauma territory, to consider the fact that I was created in an environment that was unsafe. Like my body was literally physically formed. My DNA was formed in an environment that was unsafe. And then being able to see patterns of that in interpersonal relationships throughout my life and young adulthood and getting to a point where really realizing that I didn't even feel safe with myself. So creating that safety with myself that I know at the end of the day when my head hits the pillow and I'm only left with me, no matter what anybody else decides to do or what other choices people make, at the end of the day, I'm left with me. So I need to feel really good and really safe and secure with me. And in working on that and developing that, that's now something that, speaking of alignment, like when somebody or something pushes me out of feeling safe with myself, that is a really big indicator for me that this is not necessarily something I want to pursue. So, especially in terms of mentorship and coaching, if there's someone who is even just giving advice and that advice pushes me to not feel safe with myself, that's a really big indicator of not a good match for me. How about I put it that way?
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important. It's not only, what you see on a website, like here are our values, but the way in which you receive information and the way in which you're treated. And that's actually a beautiful segue into another aspect of this that I wanted to make sure we covered. We have talked about this on the podcast before, and I think it really bears repeating within our conversation of the idea that when you talk about ethics, and again, you do have to define them, but I think we are coming from the standpoint of things like honesty, safety, trustworthiness, things like that. We are defining those as being ethical actions. And how they connect is giving our potential clients agency to feel safe, secure, confident in their choice, and to believe that it's their choice. I can remember some of the people that I've worked with before, coaches that I've worked with before, and I've said this to my potential clients as well. I can remember one coach in particular saying, "I'm here when you're ready."
Mm.
Just that response. It was such a simple thing. And I've said this to so many people. And sometimes it's, yeah, I'm ready now. And sometimes it's like, I hear in a couple of weeks. And I've had people who haven't been ready for years, and that's fine too. But that agency, I think, to make the best choice possible. That's what I want you to demand. And that's what I want to offer to others. To me, I believe that's an ethical relationship in the coaching world.
I think you do that so beautifully because the energy that you exude into the world is so warm and nurturing. And that by default, I think really attracted me into your orbit, so to speak, because very quickly I felt that sense of warmth and nurturing that was like, okay, this is a person who does give me space, give me autonomy, but also we can go deep together and we can explore this like uncharted territory, and we can do it in a way that I know that the person who I'm side by side with, the person I'm hand in hand with, is a person who's warm and nurturing and secure. It makes me feel secure. At least to me, the way that I've sort of thought about empowerment is sort of like rocket launching. It's like this exertion of, I'm going to propel you forward. It's like a slingshot type of energy. And that's kind of the opposite of like nurturing and warm. And you would think that this kind of almost portrait of like running into your mommy's arms crying is sort of like, there, I'm going to soothe you, instead of like empowering you to go be an autonomous person, when actually, there's a level of nurturing that is necessary for empowerment.
Oh my word. I feel like you just dug into this really quiet, rarely seen space and described the essence of what I'm about when it comes to coaching. I believe it's the people in the hustle and grind world, by the way. And I'm sorry, I'm calling you out, but it's that whole, you got to push through, you got to face your fears. Yes, but you don't have to like reignite your traumas. There's a distinction. There's a really important distinction, because you have to be able to heal in order to be able to grow and strengthen. And it's a very careful dance or tightrope walk sometimes of saying, am I healed enough to then push forward? And so sometimes the best thing you can do, I've seen it with my kids so many times, is say, okay, you don't have to do this. As soon as you relax and you take a deep breath and you say, I don't have to, what happens? you open up to, oh, wait, but could I? Or how could I? Or do I want to do this differently? Or, well, no, maybe I'll try. Yeah, it opens up so many more possibilities because you're releasing the resistance.
Yeah. Sometimes the brave thing is taking your time to make the best decision you can make.
All right, coming back to this idea of what it is that we're searching for. Again, with mentorship, coaching, you name it. What are we looking for? Let's talk a little bit about the guidance. We've talked about ethics. We've talked about alignment and understanding ourselves and understanding who is serving us potentially and what we're looking for. Let's dig in as we finish this up to, I guess, what it might look like to choose and maybe even how you know that it's time to get some help and then how to choose the right kind of help.
Yeah. What's interesting for me is that, and I think this is the story that I told you the last time we spoke in preparation for this conversation. I decided I wanted to hire a coach, like an individual coach, at a time in my business when I felt like I was standing on the precipice of a cliff. And this is so interesting to tell the story now with the context of all of that discussion about nurturing and safe and security and risk and being a rebel. But I felt like, and this is the best way I can think to describe it, I was standing on the precipice of something in my business. And I honestly felt like this is something big. And I'm about to leap off this cliff and dive into something like this is huge. And I can do it myself, or I can do it strapped to someone with a parachute. And I want to do it strapped to someone with a parachute, someone who's done this jump before, someone who's got the tools and the equipment and the resources and has been there before and can jump with me so that I do not have to do this alone. That's what I was really looking for in a coach at the time that I made my biggest investment in a one-on-one coach. And for me personally, the way I went about finding a coach was I took recommendations and then I did exploratory calls, those discovery calls.
Mm-hmm.
And some people I liked and some people I did not understand. And one person saw me, and it was someone who was a total stranger to me. And in a 45-minute call, asked me a series of questions and then repeated back her best understanding of what it was that she thought she could support me with that I might get from coaching. And it shocked me how much she could see from that one conversation. So that is how I chose to make that investment. Now, what's interesting is I really enjoyed our coaching relationship because I enjoyed having her in my life as that person, that go-to person. And from a money perspective, I certainly made my money back just from the fact that she ended up becoming a client of mine and she sent me several referrals. So no question that it was financially a net positive for me. But did I get the outcome that I was hoping for from the actual coaching? And I would say that answer is no. And as a result, would I make that investment, that level of investment again? I would be very hesitant to. I want to say no, but you and I had this conversation that really pushed me to think about this in a bit of a different way, which is that I can't say I never would make an investment of that size again. And I can't say that it across the board is just inherently unethical to make an investment of that size. Everybody's operating with different resources and different priorities. But at this point in time, I would be very skeptical. And I think for me, the next time I am assessing a program, and every time since, when I'm assessing a program of any kind with mentorship or coaching as part of the deal, I am looking at what are the outcomes we're supposed to be working toward. Because I think that was really murky because I didn't really know what I was jumping into when I described this metaphor of leaping off this cliff. I didn't know it was leaping into the unknown. So therefore, I didn't really know what outcome I was looking for. So it's not crazy that I didn't get it, if that makes sense. I think now when I go to make investment into coaching and formal mentorship, it's looking at what do I want to gain and how do I see a path to get there with this program.
So again, sometimes we can't exactly know the outcomes, but we can we can know where someone could potentially guide us and to understand. I mean, outcomes don't necessarily have to be so specific. I know that people want them. I guess there's a difference between outcomes when two people work together as promised versus guarantees.
Sure.
Sorry, no guarantee. I'd love to guarantee, but that's not going to happen. That being said, I think it's interesting that the way you described this was that the person was such a strong connection for you, and yet there's still a hesitation. Would there be a difference in how you chose the person? Or is it more related to the information that you'd receive that you would do differently?
Maybe both. I
Mm.
think, for one thing, mostly what I learned, the information that I received, is a lot of information about how I don't want to do business. And that is helpful, but I don't think that was that coach's intention. I mean, I know that was not the coach's intention. And I just found that I fundamentally, at my core, disagree with a lot of the approaches that matter to them. And the reality is, different things are going to matter to different people, which is where we started, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are plenty of people who work with this particular coach who have renewed and renewed and renewed their coaching program with her. So obviously they are having a really positive experience, and presumably they're seeing great results that would lead to continued investment. And I also don't blame this person for their approach to things, because it's what they're taught to do, and you can see it show up all around us in business advice from major players, and also just kind of socially in capitalism, like the related to the hustle culture that you were talking about. Not that this person is promoting hustle culture, but just using that as an example of, we are socialized to chase that. And it's either you have to unlearn it or you have to learn how to thrive within it. And I think that this person is more focused on learning how to thrive within the systems, whereas I'm more interested in unlearning them. And I didn't know that at the time that I hired them. So I couldn't have made a different decision then, other than to wait, which we talked also about earlier. Instead of just diving, I could have waited instead of just jumping in the pool. Otherwise, I don't think I could have really done it differently then, but I can now, because I'm armed with more information about what it is I want and who I am and what I want out of the situation. And I can recognize that that's not what this person is offering.
Right. And this is the heart of our conversation. And this is actually the reason why I wanted to have this conversation. So the notes that I made, because I'm a copious note taker, is that the how I would do things differently. And it's good to acknowledge that with the information that you had before, you made the decision that you needed to make, you took the chance, and we do that. And there was good that came of it. But how would you do it differently? And what could we look to as we approach the next time that we are going to look to someone to help us get to that next level? It sounds to me like the information received needs to be a combination of a person's values, their process, and the outcomes.
Yeah, spot on.
And I think it's those components that are the takeaway for us today. So we understand the values, the ethical alignment. And again, because to your point, she is helping others and they continue to renew and they're loving it because of that alignment.
Right. Presumably, it's exactly the type of support with the framework and the methodology that serves them. And that is wonderful and beautiful. And that's one of the things that's so interesting about ethics and ethical mentorship, is that if your ethics are different, then the goal isn't really to point people out and say, here's how you're being unethical. The goal is to identify what are your own ethics and does this person align with me? And if not, you have the information that you need and you can look to the next person.
There you go. And so apparently we have also figured out that you and I are definitely here for the rebels and the underdogs and the cycle breakers
who want their hand held. along the way.
Who want hugs along the way. It's so funny. I always say, I'm like, I'm not going to be a boot camp productivity coach. And if that's something that you want, more power to you. And there are plenty of people out there who are going to be like, push, go for it. Go, go, go.
Yeah. And you said something earlier too that made me think about how I show up as me with my core values in my business with the core values that I described. I want to serve the rebels and the rule breakers and the boundary pushers and the glass ceiling breakers. And my promise is that the way I'll show up in our relationship is to do my part to cultivate a safe space for you to break those glass ceilings. Right. And I think that's a really beautiful balance, in my opinion.
That is a beautiful balance to create that safe space. And to me, it's the best compliment ever to be told that I'm a safe space. And I've loved our space today. I think this is a beautiful place for us to wrap up. And before we get into like a quick little bonus and fun rapid wrap up, I'd love for you to share where we can find you online.
I usually say I'm mostly on Instagram, which is at Sarah Heeter. But honestly, I've really been loving Threads. So I'm spending a lot more time. It's an extension of Instagram in a way. I'm spending a lot more time on Threads recently. I feel like there's a lot of authentic social media happening there. And I've also been trying to spend some more time on LinkedIn. And it's Sarah Heeter in all the places. LinkedIn is a place that I've started really carrying the big, brave business conversations I'm having on that podcast. I'm carrying them into like some longer form blog post type content on LinkedIn. And of course, the Big Brave Business podcast is anywhere you can find podcasts. And I would love to see anybody who's interested in this conversation or the conversations that you regularly have here. I know you are going to love Big Brave Business. So I would love for you to meet me over there as well.
Great. Yeah, you can pop right on over from listening here. And I happen to hang out on Instagram and LinkedIn as well. And I will have these links in the show notes so we can all find you and connect. Now, it's rapid wrap up time with 3 things that inspire positively living for you. That would be a song, a saying, and a resource. Anything could be book, app, you name it, that just inspires positively living.
Okay, I'm going to start with the song because this one felt like the most pressure for me because I was like, how do you pick one song that encompasses?
That's fair.
I decided on a funny one, which is Shake It Off, which is not a good quality song in my opinion. However, it's fun. It has a great message, and sometimes you really just need to. So in the spirit of positively living, I feel like that encompasses the energy that I like to show up with. 100%. It's cheesy, it's fun, and sometimes you just need the reminder. So that's that one.
And that's going on the Positively Living Podcast Spotify playlist, and it's volume 4 now. So that's going on the playlist.
Wow, how cool. Okay, and then for a book, I would say a book that's really supported me with my positively living is Allies and Advocates by Amber Cabral. And it is about how to be a good ally and advocate in all different contexts, but especially with relation to race and anti-racism. And it's really supporting all people who you may be in a position of privilege to support. So I really, really love that book a lot, and I recommend it to everyone.
That's fantastic. The group is called Humans, and
Right.
and yeah, I'll definitely put that book on the resources collection that you can find on the resources page, positivelyproductive.com/resources. It'll be on there. Love that. And do you have a saying, a mantra, a quote?
Yes. Okay. So my favorite saying that was my phone background for the longest time is I can do anything I make time for. And the reason I love this is because I feel like there's always so much pressure in hustle culture of all the things you don't have or you aren't doing. And I can do anything I make time for is a reframe in my mind that helps me think, no, I can literally do anything, but I just can't do everything. So I get to choose what my priorities are in this moment. And that's that. So that to me feels really empowering and positive. It's my favorite saying.
It's intentional, and I love that. Okay. And last but not least, little bonus here. What are you grateful for today, Sarah?
I am grateful for, as silly as this sounds, podcasting. I know that's cheesy coming from a podcast producer, but the reality is that not only has podcasting obviously opened up this door for my business, but it's the connection with other people. It's the opportunity you and I met because of podcasting. And there are so many people that that's also true for. Some of the most important and significant relationships in my life came from either a guest on my show or guesting on their show and connecting because we have these platforms. And that is just such a beautiful part of my whole life. So that's what I'm grateful for.
I love that. And I agree wholeheartedly. I am also grateful for podcasting and especially grateful for you, Sarah. Thank you so much for shining your light so brightly in this world and for coming over here and sharing it with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me today. Your time is precious and limited, and I'm honored you chose to spend it with me. If you have feedback, questions, or want to schedule a chat, head to positivelyproductive.com/connect. And if you are looking for any of the resources referenced on the podcast, from books to products to training and more, go to positivelyproductive.com/resources.